Okay, so some of you will have seen that we've recently produced a guide around digital strategy, and that guide, is focused on, why it's really important to have one, and the kind of benefits, I guess, of that. Today, I thought, I'd take you through kind of my perspective on some of the points in that guide, and I guess some of my experiences in terms of creating a good strategy and what matters and why, so that you guys can take some of that experience on and hopefully apply it to your own businesses. I think there are some key elements that we're going to go through, so especially things around evidencing your strategy with research, and essentially giving yourselves the best possible inputs to help actually make creating the strategy quite straightforward, and making sure that the research that you do put in is of great quality, so that the opportunities you identify and all those kind of things can line you up to be as successful as possible, essentially. So just to give you a bit of an introduction, I'm Darren. I'm Digital Strategy Director here at Coast Digital. Essentially my role here is working with clients on creating strategies, finding new opportunities, and working out how to address those opportunities. So I'm hopefully fairly well qualified to do this webinar. In terms of Coast Digital, we are a full-service digital marketing agency. Strategy is one of the core pillars of our business, along with user experience design and digital marketing. So, I guess before we kick off, it's worth saying every strategy is completely different. Obviously, every business has its own challenges, its own audiences, so everything's going to be slightly different for everyone. But obviously, we've got a lot of people on the webinar today, so I'm going to try and talk in general terms, so that hopefully there will be things that you can all apply to your own businesses. And as I said, please leave questions as we go through, and we'll try and get to as many as we can at the end. Okay. So I thought I'd start with a really obvious one, which is why do you need a digital strategy? I don't want to be spending loads of time teaching you all to suck eggs, because I'm sure we all know why we need digital strategy. But there's some important points and some elements of this that I want to just make clear, because I think it helps put the rest of this in context. So in terms of key points, I think there are three key elements for me. The first one is coordination of efforts. So obviously, it's really important that when we've got a team of people working on marketing activity for a business, they can all be off doing lots of different things, but if they're not aligned around a certain goal or an objective, and have a direction set for them, then they'll all be off doing their own things. And I think lining all that up and making sure that everyone's working towards the same goals, generally speaking, is going to give you the best result. But also along with that, it gives people meaning to what they're doing. So setting someone off on a task, go and do this activity, that's fine. But go and do that activity because it's contributing towards the success of our business like this is a much more compelling thing. And generally, you'll get much more out of your team, much more motivated team if they've got a goal to aim for. So lining them up around those objectives is really smart. And then also, from a coordination point of view, if you've got a team of people all working to the same goals on the same channels and actually joining up their efforts, you're going to get more reach, wider audience, more work done on the same challenges, if you like. So you're going to be able to have a bigger impact, which is obviously really important. In terms of the second point here, I just want to talk a bit about success. So I think most importantly with any strategy, we need to outline as soon as possible what success looks like. And obviously, we do that with objectives and having smart objectives and all of those things. And obviously that, again, not teaching them to suck eggs, we all know what that means. But I think, from a context point of view, if we think of, the chain of command, no matter where you sit along that, so whether you're an exec on the coalface, really, managing a PPC campaign or sending emails or running social media, all the way through to marketing manager, through to marketing director, it doesn't matter where along that chain you are, you need to understand what success looks like in your context, so that you can either pass it up or down the chain to your boss or to your team, depending on where you sit. So, everyone needs clarity on what success looks like, so they can all celebrate in it. And again, it's all about, that motivation thing. I guess the flip side of that is if you don't know what success looks like, then you definitely don't know what failure looks like. And I think from a digital marketing point of view, failure is absolutely fine as long as we know that it's a failure and we can learn from it and we can do something with it. So, for me, as long as we can identify what those points are, so things that haven't gone as we planned or as well as we planned, and can do something about that and make them better in the future, and that's a really sensible thing to do. And having a good documented strategy will allow you to do that. So the last point, and again, this kind of is a lead on from the first 2 points, is around making better decisions. So the final point, I guess, to give an example, a lot of the time, we get asked questions from our clients, so I know, well, I assume that you guys are going to be asked these questions from other people around your business as well. So things like, why are we not doing this, or why are we putting budget into that, or, what's happening with this, all those kind of questions. And if you've got a documented strategy, you can say, well, we're not doing that because X, and our budget for this channel is focused on delivering against this objective. We can look at this thing you're suggesting, but it's going to cost this much money. We think it will get you this much back. You can put a much more rounded and sensible argument together. And then you're not just jumping around at, the highest person's opinion, and you're able to kind of replicate that a little with evidence. And that's something that we're going to come on to in a sec. So, that's, I think, for me, the key reasons why we need a digital strategy to work to as a marketing team and a marketing function, whether that be internal, working with an agency, it doesn't matter. I think, we need to join all these dots up, make sure that we're all focused on similar goals. So before you start with a strategy, I think, you really need to have a couple of things nailed down. If you're lucky enough to start with a blank canvas, you still really need to have a couple of key inputs. So for me, those two things are, you need to know objectives, so what we're trying to achieve, and budgets. How much are we going to spend to get there? Now, we get challenged quite a bit, generally speaking, on, we might get given a budget, and the client might say to us, well, okay, here's my budget, what can you get me for that? So, we have one of those elements, so we have a budget, and we work up to what the objectives might be. Or the other way around, the client might say to us, here's my objective, how much do you need to spend, how are you going to resource getting me to that objective? Which is fine, and either one of those is absolutely fine, and there are ways to work from budget to objectives or vice versa. But I think the point is, and the point that I really want to make here, is that these two things are linked, and it's really important that we bear that link in mind whenever we're talking about budget or objectives. So, if you're in a position where perhaps you've just finished a year, a financial year, you've got to the end of the year, you've hit budget, and then you're, the board has said, okay, we're going to increase the marketing budget by a chunk, then, realistically, they're going to be expecting you, and rightly so, to be coming back and saying, well, actually, we think we can achieve even more, with this budget, and this is what the objectives are going to be. So, it's a really, they're absolutely linked. So a reduction in budget as well, on the flip side of that, is one that, we need to also be able to manage its expectations on. So, if we look at this kind of situation here, where we've got this budget which is small, and objectives which in the grand scheme of things is bigger, and it's a position that I'm fairly familiar with, and I'm sure I'm sure there's a few of you out there that will be fairly familiar with this situation as well. It's really important that we've got a piece of evidence or a piece of discussion topic, at least, around how we can align these things more closely. So having a good strategy and having evidence in that strategy to help you back up a discussion like this is really useful. Because if you work in an organisation where goalposts move, so where objectives change midway through the year, or where perhaps there's been a tough month and then budgets are slashed, or even things like oil and gas at the moment. We know the oil price is coming down, so these companies are struggling, and things like marketing budget are always the first thing to go. If that's the case, then if your budget drops midway through the year, then obviously those objectives that you set with a bigger budget are no longer smart, as it were, because they're probably not realistic anymore. So you need to have a compelling story to tell around why they're not realistic and what you can achieve with the new budget that you've got, and having a strategy documented will help you do that. So and that allows you then to bring those objectives in line. And a lot of this is about expectation setting, and strategy really helps you do that. And I'll talk about kind of key steps that we'll go through to help with that towards the end of this deck. Okay, so for those of you that have seen our digital strategy guide, then you'll recognise this. If you haven't seen that, then obviously I'd recommend going to download that after the webinar, because there's lots of useful stuff in there. But this slide essentially is the process that we would generally follow. So we at Close Digital would generally follow when we're working with a client on a digital strategy. So I guess this slide generally makes it look like a linear process. So if you follow the arrows around, research, positioning and messaging, data review, personas, opportunity analysis, and roadmap for success. In theory, it can go like that, but also those first 4 points are fairly, you can jump back and forth between those points really at any point, and it doesn't have too much of an impact. So although it looks like a linear process, it doesn't have to be, and actually it probably needs to be tailored to suit your business, as we go through. So I'm going to talk you through each of these steps and why I think they're important and where they lead into a strategy. But I guess the first 4 steps, so research, positioning, data, and personas, are kind of your inputs into the opportunity analysis piece. So as long as you've got all those things kind of lined up, then your opportunity analysis becomes a lot more straightforward, which actually makes the whole thing actually quite a straightforward document to put together. Okay, so let's talk about research. For me, research plays a really big role in everything we do here at Coast. We have a user experience function here at Coast that we created essentially to help us make better websites and actually provide better user experiences for websites. But what we found when we added that function into our team is that the research that they would do and the findings that they would come out with would be really, really valuable for our marketing team as well. And so from that point, we decided, well, how do we work this in? How do we work these research capabilities that we've got into, other processes around the business? And actually, the strategy process, I guess, was one that was the obvious one to start at, because obviously we need to know about our audience in order to form a good strategy. So, from a research perspective, I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of user research techniques that we use, but just really basic stuff that anyone can really go ahead and do. And in terms of getting to gory details around the audience and what their motivations are. I'll give you some tips on how to do that well, and then how to document that. But I guess for me, the whole point of this is we want to evidence our strategy as best we can. We want to give ourselves the best chance of success when we put this strategy together. So research allows us to do that, and it allows us to put facts in our strategy, which obviously helps with winning any arguments, winning new budgets, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so if we look at these 3 kind of pillars here, this lovely Venn diagram, this is at Coast, this is how we generally talk about most projects that we run, whether they're strategy, marketing, or website design and build projects. These are the 3 pillars that we try and bring together, and we have this sweet spot in the middle, which allows us to bring all these elements together and deliver something that's really useful, compelling, and successful. So I'm just going to run you through each of these pillars and what I think they mean and what they mean to me from a strategy perspective, and why they're useful for you guys. So we'll start with business. I guess the more aware we are of a business and its surrounding environment, the better and more well-educated our strategy is going to be. It's as simple as that. So we need to think about things like what's happening in the business. Are we launching new products? Have we got a new service offering coming out? Are we making any acquisitions? Over the next 12 months that we need to plan for in our strategy. What's happening in the environment? So are there new competitors? Are there legislation changes? One of our clients in the food industry is gearing up for some legislation coming in January around allergens, allergens in food, and then having to be clearly documented. So things like that we have to plan for, and we have to make sure that we're aware of all that stuff when we're working on a strategy. Even if it doesn't have a direct impact on digital, that stuff is useful to know, because things around the business are going to get strained. So things like resources might get strained around that time as well. So we should be aware of all those things. And then also from a marketing perspective, so we need to think about what's been happening from a marketing point of view, over the last 12, 18, 24 months, and what success has been like. Because obviously there's lots we can learn from that. And I guess the most important part of that is selling ourselves. So how do we sell ourselves, and how do we sell the products that we want to sell, the services we want to sell? And I guess how do we deliver those key messages to our audience in the right places? So I'm going to talk a bit more about positioning and messaging in a second, but generally speaking, businesses, when we sit them down and we get stakeholders from across the business in a room and we say, okay, so what are the USPs? We might get 4 or 5 different answers from 8 different people, which is fine, but it's just really important that we all understand as a wider team, who, I guess, what our USPs are and why we're selling our products and services the way that we are. So it's a really important exercise to go through, and we'll come on in a bit more detail to what that looks like in a sec. I've got a good example on that too. And then the second pillar here is data. So obviously, as a marketing house, we're very familiar with data, and we spend a lot of time in things like web analytics tools, looking at success and seeing what we can learn from those numbers. So obviously, all that stuff really helps from a strategy point of view as well. Not just from identifying what's happened, but also identifying opportunities as well. So, web analytics is a really great tool for that, but there are also some other tools out there that will help you identify opportunities, and I'll come on to talk a little bit about those later on. But things like, how does our website currently perform? How does our marketing mix currently look? What are the factors that have the biggest impact on that mix and on that user journey to a successful sale or sign up or whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. The other thing though, with data, we talk about web analytics a lot, but there are other areas too. So things like CRMs, things like Salesforce and that kind of thing. Where we can understand how our pipeline's looking now. So if we're a B2B sort of organisation, we might need to know that when planning our strategy. Because if our pipeline is doing really well and really full, then actually we might be able to have a different strategy to one that if the pipeline was empty coming into the end of the financial year, we might have to do something about that more urgently. So, there are, again, all that kind of stuff, is really important to know. And the good thing about data is that data is fact. So it really helps evidence decisions, and it's hard to argue with, things like we've put an additional 10% in PPC this year because last year it gave us the best ROI, and we think there's opportunity for growth. Here's the opportunity. That kind of thing is great, and it's really hard to argue with because the data is factual, generally speaking. Now, good data, I guess, is an assumption, and data is only factual if the data is good. So one of the first things that we do whenever we pick up a new client is get into their web analytics accounts and do a big sort of audit, make sure we're tracking everything we need to be tracking, and make sure that the numbers are accurate. Because if they're not accurate, you can lead yourself down, I guess, the wrong path by looking at bad data. So, the strategy is very much about the inputs. So if you've got crap inputs, then, you might be making crap decisions on that. So, it's really, really not ideal. So yeah, the last point on this is users. So, as I said earlier, we've got this user experience capability in-house, which is useful for us. But you don't necessarily need that to do this kind of work. It's about understanding your audience, and it's about understanding who your customers are, but more importantly, why they're customers, why a prospect might become a customer, and what their motivations are, and really understanding that in a bit of gory detail. From a digital strategy perspective, this is arguably the most important step. So an understanding of your audience and what drives them will allow you to have the biggest impact of the marketing activity that you carry out. So, you really need to make a decent plan for spending time on understanding those motivations and goals of your audience. Okay, so in terms of how we do that, as I said, we generally follow kind of user experience practices, but these are things that you will all be familiar with as marketers. You'll all understand the terminology I'm going to use here. And from a research perspective, we've got this kind of sliding scale between quantitative and qualitative research, and we really want a good blend across those things because we get numbers from one end and detail from the other end. So I'm going to go through left to right, filling out, and just give a quick insight into kind of the techniques that we might use when we're researching a strategy. So the first thing is a survey, really easy thing to do and really cost-efficient way to get lots of insights. So, I'd imagine most people on the webinar will have a SurveyMonkey account or a SurveyGizmo account or something along those lines. Creating a top-level survey, sending out to any email data that you've got is a good thing to do, assuming you've got permission to do that, obviously. And then the other side, if you don't have a huge email huge email database that you can access, and things like Facebook will allow you to run ads, fairly cost effectively towards a target audience based on behavior and what you expect your audience to be, to help you get some insights. So that, to help you get up the volume of insights that you might need for a survey. So that's a really good way to tackle that if you don't have a lot of your own data. And one of the things we do in our surveys as well is the last question is generally, would you mind giving us 15 minutes of your time in the future to help us further with our research? And those people that say yes to that generally volunteer themselves for a phone interview. And phone interviews are great. I mean, it gives you a chance to speak one-to-one with an actual customer or potential customer. It allows you to get into some of the, as I said, the gory details around why someone would make the decisions that they make, what influences those decisions, what are the most important factors in that decision-making process. And that's the kind of stuff that really drives really great marketing. So if we understand those things in a bit of detail, we can really deliver some powerful messaging, some powerful marketing, and actually get some really good results. So phone interviews are great, and obviously you can do less of those than surveying. You're not going to phone thousands and thousands of people unless you've got an army of researchers that's out there doing it. Realistically, you can make far fewer phone calls, and you'll find you'll start coming up against, similar themes and patterns. And once you get to that point, you probably don't need to do any more because you're probably finding out what you need to find out. So the next step is focus groups. We all know what a focus group is, so I won't dwell on this one too much. But really, this is again about getting group opinion on certain things. These are great for new services, new products, or looking at ways you can improve a service or product. Get it in front of a group of people and get their reactions, get them talking about it, and get them thinking about how it could be improved. That's a great thing to do. The next one is guerrilla research. So this is unplanned, essentially, research. So where we would generally, when we do this, we show up at things like trade shows or events where we know our target audience are going to be, and we might buy people coffee in exchange for 10 minutes, around just to answer some questions, and we can do that if we're at a trade show. We can do that with competitors as well, so we can go to competitors' stands, a bit incognito, talk to them about the way they might sell a similar service or product, get a bit of insight that way as well. So there's lots to be gained from that, and this is a really great way of getting quality data out of people and insights out of people in quite a short space of time. So over a day, at an event, you might speak to 30 people, which actually is a really good, cost-efficient way of getting some good insight. And then lastly, and the most quality of the research that you might do, but obviously the most time-consuming, is actually contextual research, and this is actually going to a user's environment and seeing the environmental factors around the things that might be affecting them that we probably can't see from a phone interview or from a focus group. And the great thing about contextual research is, you're not taking the user out of their own environment. They're not in a lab. They're not, on the phone. They're able to just do what they normally do, and you can watch that and learn from the environment they're in, how often they're getting interrupted while they're trying to make a decision or while they're trying to research your product, and what impact that has on their decision making and how quickly they do it. All those kind of things can be learned from that kind of research. Obviously, it's quite time intensive to do, so you do less of that, much less of that than perhaps these other methods. But it's worth doing some of that if you can do, because it adds a real layer of quality. Okay, and in terms of research quality, there are some elements that you really need to think about. First thing is planning research. It's really easy just to go and do loads of research. That's a really easy thing to do. But if you don't have a plan and don't think about what you need to know, then you can really go off and just waste loads of time. So you need to think about how many people am I going to speak to, and what do I want to find out. They're the most important things. But then also things like, how am I going to record this research? If I'm on the phone, it's really difficult to take notes, speak, think about the next question, and listen to the answers all at the same time. So you might need an assistant. You might need some kind of phone recording kit. Think about all those things too. If you're in front of people, things like screen recording software is great as well, because you can see mouse movements, all that kind of stuff. But again, it is all down to current situation and what you might need to do. And then also, in terms of timing, you want to think about how much time you're going to need to give to a piece of research like this from your own job perspective. Obviously, we've all got day jobs, so we need to be realistic about what's achievable. But one of the things that people don't often consider with this is, it's not just the research that needs to be done, but also once you're done with the research, you've then got to turn what people have told you into inputs to your strategy. Unfortunately, they don't tell you how to write a strategy when they're telling you the answer to your questions, and that's the bit that we as marketers need to do. So, we have to chew through all the research and then turn that into useful inputs for our strategy. So that takes time too, so it's worth planning in that. The next most important thing from a research perspective is sample size and recruitment. So we need to think about, getting a good sample of candidates from a research perspective. So that would be, across customers and the different audience types that you have, perhaps of existing customers, but also prospects. If you can get hold of prospects, and then there might be other people as well that you might need to talk to. If you've got lots of different target audiences, then obviously you need to get a decent spread across those things. Or if location is important to your business, you need to try and work out, make sure you get the sample size in each location right, to be fair and to not sway your research into one area or something along those lines. So really, don't forget, what we're trying to get to here is there's kind of nitty-gritty details around, where your marketing can add the most value to their lives. And obviously that, you need to make sure that you get a decent sample size to learn that information. From a recruitment point of view, I already said, email is a great way to do that, and Facebook ads is a really strong way to do that as well. If you're looking from a B2B point of view, then if you know job titles and things like that, then LinkedIn ads can also help you. If you're really struggling for candidates, which generally speaking you won't do, but if you are really struggling, then think about incentivizing. So something like a 20 quid John Lewis voucher will go a long way to getting someone to give you a bit of their time to answer some questions. So that can really help. And then lastly on this, it's really important to be objective. So don't assume that you already know what the research is going to tell you, and don't carry out research that's going to give you the outcome that you want it to give you. I think that that's the thing that's really easy to do. So for example, if I'm a marketing manager and I want to send out thought leadership pieces via email, I might ask a question in my research. Do you want to receive thought leadership pieces via email on this subject? The answer is probably yes, and most people will just say yes. But actually, that hasn't helped you out. All it's done is given you the answer you wanted. It'd be better to ask, what are the biggest challenges you face with regards to this industry challenge? Because then you're going to hear it from them, and and you need to learn that. And then your content that you create and the messaging you deliver can be tailored to that need, and it's much more powerful. And things like what stage is your team at with regards to whatever industry challenge, and those kind of things can really have a big impact on how well these bits of messaging do. And then we generally find as well that from an objectivity point of view, we position ourselves as a third party when we're doing this work. So we don't necessarily say that we're working for a client, and that means that we get more honest results when we do that. We position ourselves as a third party. We anonymize any feedback that we get, so that people are open and honest, and we get better results. So to summarize all that, understanding your users and your audiences and their situation, and how you can best support them is really going to give you the best steer on your strategy in terms of how you need to deliver messaging to them. Okay, so in terms of wrapping that up, personas are the way that we do that. So we take our research, we develop that into personas, which are focused on goals and motivations. Focus on what really matters to that audience. I'm not a big fan of case studies where it says he's got a dog and he likes long walks on the beach. Unless you sell flip-flops and they're really good for walking on the beach, it's probably not that relevant. So focusing on the things that really matter, so those goals and motivations. So try and work in as much as you can from the research. So level of product knowledge that this group's going to have, stage in the buying cycle they might be in, what elements of your value proposition are they most interested in. All that kind of stuff is really vital for making your marketing effective. So try and tie those things in. I've got an example here, and this is a really cut down example of a persona, but to give you some insights into the kind of things that we might be talking about here. So you've got goals, which is essentially a summary of what they want to achieve, motivations, which is a snapshot of their mindset, and then we must and we must never, which essentially give us instructions as to how we might target them or deal with them from a comms perspective in future. So here, just as an example, this guy's looking for a case of wine for a dinner party. So from his perspective, one of his motivations is going to be, I need to look like I know what I'm doing. From a wine point of view, I need to look sophisticated, whether I am or not. So we need to make sure that, we're giving him good advice. So things under the "we must" section there, things like consider a phone number for live chat, and for wine advice, those kind of things. We're meeting that motivation by doing that. So it's a really important thing to do. From a persona's perspective, well, it's just worth saying that you shouldn't just stop once you finish your personas. Audiences change, marketplaces change. So keep researching, and when you learn new things about your audience, which happens all the time, when you learn new things, add those into your personas if you can. So you've got this constant reference going on. So if someone leaves you as a business, as a customer leaves, you find out why they left, and add that to a "we must never." If the customer keeps buying from you, become an advocate, find out why, and add that to a "we must." Those kind of things. Make those personas as important as you can. Okay, so once you've done your personas, once you've really got the gory details of your audience nailed and you really understand it, you can then come on to positioning and messaging, and make sure that those things are then aligned with what your audience need. So from a positioning point of view, we're looking at things like, the unique benefits, market context, reason to believe, all that kind of stuff. So from a marketing point of view, again, I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs here. Positioning statement is kind of your elevator pitch, and you really need to make a clear statement around what it is you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. It's as simple as that. And we've all been to those websites where you go there, you look around for 5 minutes and think, I have no idea what these people do. It's just one of those things where if you don't get it right, you're going to lose people straight away. And then following that, we generally build up a messaging kind of matrix around selling points. So again, I said earlier, around those different selling points around the business. We pull those selling points through, and then, sort of look at them in a bit of detail and actually sort of drill into them a bit more. So, we might have some supporting messages around each one, and then we might have some substantiation and like proof points around each of these messages. And that's probably the most important part of this. So, it's really easy to say that you're a market leader, but, can you actually prove that? How do you back that up? Because people need to see that stuff. People need to understand that you don't just say things, that you're able to back them up with actual evidence to make them actually buy into these things. So I've got an example using the Coast digital website, just to kind of, I guess, show what I'm talking about here. So this is just the screenshot of the top of our homepage, and I thought I'd just go through where we've kind of outlined some of these points. So you can see here, this is our positioning statement. So just quickly read it out. It's not a sales pitch. Coast Digital delivers end-to-end digital marketing solutions based on the goals that matter to you most. We take the time to understand your business and create a strategy to accomplish your commercial objectives. By working in partnership, we can help you accelerate growth online and increase your digital marketing returns. So that's fairly quick elevator pitch of what we do and why we do it. Obviously, you're seeing some of that today because we're talking about strategy. So, we're kind of living that positioning right now, which is kind of good. From a messaging point of view, we have a few key messages that we like to use on a regular basis. So things like marketing you can measure, the strapline that we've grown up with. You can see that right at the top of the site next to our logo. But also, kind of things around, we're inspired by user insight. We're fanatical about data, all things that you've heard already me talk about, which is good. And then, then substantiation. So we're saying those things, but how do we prove that? Well, we've got on the homepage again, all within view is a case study around the user-centered design increases website performance by 83%. So that kind of covers off the inspired by user insight and the fanatical about data piece. And then also we've got this success stories, I guess, link here, 13 plus years of great results, which takes you through to our case studies page, where we've got lots and lots of great success stories that we've created with our clients. So we're backing up all of the messaging that we're putting on this page with stats, with numbers, and we're proving it. And that's really important because it just makes the message really powerful. Okay, great. So we're going to move on now to talk about opportunity analysis. So again, we're just lining up all of our inputs now. So we know our audience, we know our position and our messaging, we know our objectives, we know our budget. All these ingredients are now coming together. And the last piece of this puzzle, I guess, is the opportunity. So we need to understand what's available for us to go after, essentially, and try and win. And obviously, if we get a good view of that, then we can make sure that the objectives that we're setting are realistic and achievable. So there are 3 ways that we generally do this. So we look at data. Obviously, data is one of our core competencies here, so that would make sense. But we also look at competitors, because it's really important that we understand what's happening in the market. But what can we learn from the competitors? What are they doing that's good? What's not good? And more importantly, where are the gaps in the market based on what the research that you've just done tells you? So what, from a user's point of view, are they looking to find that no one else is doing? Because that's where you can really be successful. And then from a marketplace point of view, there are tons of tools available to help you with opportunity analysis. I'm going to take you through, I guess, my toolkit, if you like, when I'm doing opportunity analysis. So I'm going to take you through some of the tools and how I use them. And there are other tools available, obviously, and you can pay for tools as well. We use some paid-for tools, but I'm not going to plug any of those today, so just stick to the free ones. So the first one that I always use, but I probably use this the most, is Google Trends, just because it helps give you context to any marketplace that you might be going into or any marketplace that you're already in. So you can see here, I've just put SEO and search engine optimization on the chart. You can see that as an agency, if we were bidding on search engine optimization or trying to optimize our own website for search engine optimization keyword, we see we'll be missing out on 90% of the opportunity because everyone's searching for SEO. So we need to understand what those opportunities look like. And again, this will be different for every business, but getting some of this detail in here and understanding where people are looking, what your customers are looking for, it's worth spending a bit of time here. So once you've done that and once you've got a bit of an understanding, you can look at the Google Keyword Planner. Google Keyword Planner kind of takes Google Trends on to the next level in terms of giving you actual numbers. So in terms of average monthly searches, also the blue bars at the top show you some trends. So if there's any seasonality, and again, that's important to know from your strategy, formation, so when to apply more budget. So, obviously into Christmas for retail is a massive time. And, actually after Christmas for solicitors is a massive time for divorce, because obviously everyone's fed up with each other after Christmas. So, all that stuff is important to know, and these kind of tools can help you with that. So here again, you can see SEO is much, much higher volume than search engine optimization, and the suggested bid is much lower. So actually, we could potentially be spending our budget much more effectively on the term SEO than search engine optimization. So it's worth planning budgets along those lines. And there's also the display planner. So if you've got, if you need to reach outside of search and you've got, sort of paid media budget to go with, then obviously the display planner is a really great thing. Obviously, it only works on the Google Display Network, and there are tons of other networks out there that you can work with from a display perspective. But this just helps give you an idea of demographics and device usage as well, which is kind of useful. So you can see here, I've done the same thing from an SEO perspective. We're looking at, a huge amount of volume, probably too much. We probably need to look at cutting that down. But you can see at the top, we've got things like average age and that kind of stuff, which is really useful. So we can say, if my product is only useful to 18 to 24-year-olds, I can see that only 16% of that volume is going to be relevant to me. So that's quite a useful thing to know, and it can, again, helps from a budgeting point of view. The social tools that you have, so all the social media platforms now have ad ad tools built into them, and each of those has audience builders. So even if you're not going to spend money on the social media platforms, you can still use these tools to help you work out how big your audience is. It's quite a useful thing to do. So again, I've carried on the search engine optimization example here. You can see that on Facebook, there are 230,000 people in the UK that are interested in search engine optimization. So there's a decent audience there. On LinkedIn, I can see that there are 6,000 people that have SEO-related jobs. That's quite useful for me to know. And then also on Twitter, I can see that between 10 and 100,000 tweets a day talk about SEO, whereas only 1,000 to 10,000 talk about search engine optimization, probably because I can't fit it in a tweet. But I guess it's still useful to know. Okay, cool. So that wraps up, I guess, the free tools that I would generally use from an opportunity analysis perspective. But at this point, you've got all your inputs lined up. So now you're thinking, right, let's go back to my budget, let's go back to my objectives, let's just make sure this is all going to work out the way we want it to. So we need to do a bit of a sense check on this stuff, and we need to make sure that we've still got smart objectives. So just to give you an example of that, let's say we had this objective, generate 10,000 new sign-ups from in-house SEO managers in the UK from LinkedIn during 2015. I could now go back to that and say, well, that's not actually possible because there's only 6,000 on LinkedIn. So, obviously this is a really simple example, but it demonstrates the point. We've identified that there are only 6,000 people in our audience on LinkedIn. So in that case, we shouldn't be trying to target 10,000 people because it's just not going to happen. So again, as I said earlier, this is all about managing expectations as well. Okay, so from a forecasting and planning perspective, now we're really into this kind of, the putting pen to paper and actually writing the strategy. But luckily, by now we already know most of the answers to this stuff because we know what our audience want, we know where they are, we know what the opportunity is, we know where the gaps in the market are. This all now just needs a bit of marketing skill and a bit of knowledge from, from your internal marketing team to kind of draw this up and turn this into an actual strategy. So all the inputs are lined up and it pretty much will write itself. You just need to work out, joining the dots essentially at this point. And it's a really nice thing to do. But the most important part here is forecasting. So it's really can be quite a difficult thing to do, but it's well worth it. So if you can, if you can create a view of what the future might look like based on numbers and actually saying, well, this is when we think we're going to hit our objectives and how much we're going to need to spend to get there, and these are the channels we're going to use, and blah, 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 then that's a really compelling thing. And again, if things change throughout the year, if the situation changes, or if your resource changes, or if your budget changes, or if your objectives change, then obviously you can adjust your forecast to suit that. And it just means you're in real good control all the time. And we find that, as an agency, that's really important. So it's a useful thing to do. So from a forecasting perspective, just to give you a bit of detail on that, if you've got lots of historic data, so in terms of web analytics data and performance data, then actually creating a forecast is relatively straightforward because you look at that historic data and you look at ways of applying that forwards, and you've got a good benchmark to work from, and you can be realistic about how things are going to perform. So that's quite nice. If you've got no data, then obviously it's much more tricky. So you can look at the opportunity analysis tools that you've been to, and then just use common sense. And as marketers, we've probably got experience using some of these channels from other jobs or other industries. Let's see if we can apply some of that, to the mix as well. So don't forget, this is just a forecast. So no one is expecting you to predict the future with 100% accuracy. Because if you do that, you wouldn't be working in marketing. So it is a bit like the weather forecast. You can get it wrong, but the important thing is, you're keeping them up to date, you're keeping them relevant, and that you've always got this kind of number to be aiming for. So just in terms of that, so whenever I put a forecast together, just to spot any anomalies and to spot anything that I don't think is realistic, I always put a chart next to each of my sort of numbers, if you like, to any objective that I'm working to, whether it's leads or revenue or sales or whatever. I always try and put a chart next to each thing, whether it's by channel or not, just to kind of see if there's anything that looks crazy, because the minute you put it on a chart, it's really easy to see if there's an anomalous result or a big month that you know is not possible, and make sure things that match your seasonal trends and all that kind of stuff. So, to give you an example, here's, this kind of chart looks slow and steady growth. That might be, if you're doing SEO-related work or your brand channels, if you're trying to do some brand growth work, you're likely to see this kind of slow and steady growth over time. And if you see that when you've done your forecast, then great, you've probably done it right. So that's good. And then things like, I've called it here start-stop activity, but it's more like campaign-based activity, so things like email marketing. You send an email, you get a spike in traffic, and then that email fizzles out. So, you would expect short, sharp bursts in that, which is nice. And then, lastly, if your chart looks like this, it's kind of logarithmic growth, then you need to change it because it's probably wrong, because not many marketing channels grow like that, unless you're really lucky, anyway. So make sure you keep yourself, don't shoot yourself in the foot with a forecast, because that's really going to stuff you up. So I thought, again, being as I'm talking about this stuff, I thought I'd show you how we do this stuff for ourselves, just give you a bit of an idea. So, as we say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So here we go. I'm going to give you a little rundown on the Coast Digital's, some at least, of Coast Digital's digital marketing strategy, which is very exciting. A commercial director sweats a little bit when I start talking about this stuff, so I'll try not to say too much. This, in the middle here, we've got our objective, so increase revenues from digital marketing clients, or new digital marketing clients, by 20% this financial year. that's a growth target for us. Obviously, we're trying to grow just like any other business is. We do that in a number of different ways. So here I've just kind of visualized this. Obviously, normally it's a bit less exciting than this, but this is a visual version of it. So, we're lucky enough to get referrals, and we're lucky enough to have clients that refer us into other people. So that's nice, and we generally get a lot of work from that kind of thing. And along with that, we have, a traditional kind of marketing activity, if you like. So search marketing, we do our own paid search, we do our own search optimization, and we rank top for, digital marketing agency and online marketing agency, all those things, and that all helps us with our lead generation activity massively. We'll do our own social media as well, and we share content and get involved in conversations, all that kind of stuff. We do events as well, so we do trade shows and that kind of thing. We have a demand generation team, which you're, I'd imagine, likely to get a follow-up from over the next couple of days, which is very exciting for you. And then content marketing, which is the biggest piece of what we do in terms of marketing, and definitely takes the most effort, but also allows us to add the value that we've been talking about all the way through today, adding value to our audience. And actually, you're kind of partway through a part of our strategy now. I'm going to take you through that in a sec. But just in terms of content marketing, we've done a few different streams this year so far. So earlier in the year, we did conversion rate optimization and display, and obviously now we're talking about digital strategy, and each one of those has had a guide, some blog posts, and some webinars, and all this kind of stuff. So we're pumping out lots of content on relevant topics, and the topics that we pick are driven by the research we do into our audience, things that matter to our audience the most, and obviously actually we're getting better at it, because for today's webinar we had the most sign-ups of any other webinar that we've ever had. So that's really good. We seem to be doing well. So in terms of our content marketing team for digital strategy, this is where we're at. We're at the webinar. And I can see, previously to that, so in our content stream for this, we've had a guide, had supporting blog content as well. We've had a load of marketing activity going on. So we've had social and email activity going on around launching the guide and promoting the webinar, all that kind of stuff. So the likelihood is, the reason you're all here today is that you've either seen something of our social activity, so whether that's you follow us already, or you've seen one of our paid ads, you've seen some of our content, or you come via an email that we've sent you to promote this webinar. So, we're fairly confident that most of you will have come via one of those three means, which is good, but I can also give you an idea of what's going to happen in the future. So we're going to upload this to YouTube, and you'll probably all get a link to that. I think it's going to be on SlideShare as well, so if that's your preferred slide viewing platform, please do that. And then obviously there's going to be follow-up activity as well. You can see that listed here. I won't ruin the surprise. I'm sure you'll see that over the next couple of days anyway. So, but I guess this, this gives us a good view of how we kind of plan campaigns like this as part of our strategy. So we've got this content marketing activity as part of our strategy, and we have a theme within that, and then we have this kind of activity plan within that. So actually you're going down from top-level strategy of objective and boiling that down into gory details of plan and activity. But also we've got a forecast around this as well. So we were looking at trying to get 67 registrations for today's webinar. And there's a reason for that. It sounds like an odd number, but there's a reason for that, and the reason is that we get 45% attendance, generally speaking, on our webinars. So we would generally expect if we got 67, we get 30 target attendees, and there's a reason we go for 30 attendees. So our 30 attendees gets us with our pipeline numbers that we already know. So again, going back to understanding our business and our data, we know that from 30 attendees at a webinar, we'll get 5 meetings. And for us, that then goes on to provide us, without going into gory details of our pipeline, enough revenue, enough enough to make that worthwhile for us to do. So this is how we then go on to forecast all our activity. We work back from our through our pipeline and work this all out. So we know what we want to get. Now, luckily speaking, we had 100 people, I think, registered for today's webinar, and there are 43 on the webinar right now. So that is pretty much 45%, pretty much bang on where we wanted. But so luckily, we're over on the number of attendees by 12, which is really good. So we're going to need more than 5 meetings. So anyone wants to volunteer, they can just pop a little thing down in the bottom of the chat there, and that would be great. So yeah, I'm not going to sell any more than that. Let's talk about just wrapping up, because we're coming to the end now. So, so just in terms of wrapping up, we've got, today I've gone through, my perspectives on all this stuff, and obviously it's different for every business. But I think, if you use my process that I've outlined today, you'll be in a really good position when you come to actually create a strategy, have all the inputs you need all lined up, and all fairly clearly defined, so that you're in a position to just put pen to paper and use that marketing know-how that you've got to turn those insights into an actual strategy. And that's, really at that point, it's fairly straightforward, because you will have already identified audiences and their needs, your opportunities, your budgets, and it all just feeds together at that point. And you're really in a really good position to do that. So just in terms of being really clear about this, a digital strategy sets out to understand the objectives, audience, and current marketplace, evaluate opportunities for investment to meet objectives, and plan activity and milestones in the short, medium, and long term. And we do that by being really clear about the messaging and the positioning that we're going to be, working with, and how we're going to substantiate those messages, by establishing who our target audience are, combined with their needs and their behaviours, and how we can influence those. We investigate the opportunity across all the channels that we need to investigate, and then provide an overall roadmap of activity. So that's the kind of key elements to any strategy. And I think if everyone followed that, I think you'd be in a pretty good place. Cool. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. So I'm just going to go have a look at some questions. So hopefully we've had some questions come through. Again, if there's any more questions now, then feel free to drop them in. Okay, so I've had a question from James around personas. So how many personas are typically necessary? And actually, that's a real, should be quite flexible on that. So from a personas perspective, you need to have a think about how you're going to break them down, and actually you'll find that the research will give you the answer to that. From a persona perspective, you can break it down if your audience is, demographically split or location, split by location, then that can have an impact on how many personas that you might want to create. But also, it can be just purely down to user needs. So, the example that I showed you was around getting a case of wine for a dinner party. That's specifically based around the user's need. So we can create a persona around that, so that anyone who's got that need fits that persona. And actually, so it really can vary. We go from anywhere from 3 on probably the simplest projects to 10 to 15, maybe more on the more complex side of things, depending on how many different products are on offer, services, and how many different people it appeals to. So yeah, that's I guess the short answer to that. I think we've probably got time for a couple more questions. So so Matt has asked, how long should a strategy take to write? So it's a good question. I think, from my perspective, when we've got all of our inputs lined up, actually creating the strategy and the documentation of that strategy doesn't take very long at all. It might take a day, it might take 2 days to do, but actually the bit that takes the effort, I think, is actually getting all those ducks in a row, if you like, from an inputs point of view. And that can scale depending on how much time you've got available to you and how much resource you've got available to you. So the more time you can put to it, the better. But obviously, we've all got day jobs to do, and we just need to make sure that we're not being crazy about how much research we want to do. So yeah, I would suggest that you need to give yourself a couple of days to actually document the thing and create a document that you can present to the business. But then, from a research point of view, you might want to spend, I would generally aim to spend a week at the very least on research and that kind of thing. But the more the merrier, I guess, is the honest answer on that. Okay. So we've had a couple of other questions come through while I've been answering those questions as well. So so Monty was asked, how often should we revisit strategy for a campaign? From a strategy point of view, we need to be constantly trying to learn. So, I guess, we want to make sure that we're monitoring success against our objectives on a regular basis. But in terms of sort of revisiting things like forecasts, you can do that because it's more of a long-term activity. You can probably do that on a quarterly basis, unless something changes. So if something changes, if a budget changes, or if a new competitor enters the marketplace and it really disrupts things, then you may want to adjust your forecast to suit that. And again, you want to use the most up-to-date budget that you've got available, of the most up-to-date numbers that you've got available to you at the time, for things around, website performance and those kind of things really help us just make sure your numbers are as accurate as they can be. Okay, we've got time for one more. So let me just see. Sorry, I've got a list here. Okay, so Emma's asked, this is an interesting one. When it comes to sort of looking at competition, how many competitors do you look at, and do you look beyond sort of direct competition? And I think that, yeah, absolutely is the answer to that. We need to think about when we're looking at competitors, officially direct competitors. Obviously we can look at what they're doing, and in context to us, it's really easy to see what they do better than us and what they do worse than we do. And then again, as I said earlier, where the gaps in the market are and where we can really shine through from a messaging and positioning point of view. So that's a really important thing to do. But also, we mustn't ever forget to look at the wider industry and what we can learn from what other people are doing. And even the big brands are always doing exciting new things. But it doesn't have to be, big brands that you look at. Even local businesses do exciting things, on a fairly regular basis from a digital point of view, because it doesn't always cost that much money. And you can see some great examples on things like social media where advertising campaigns have done really well for a local business, just because they've been a bit different or just been bang on from a messaging point of view. Right, I think we are at time. So. I see we've got a few more questions that I haven't answered yet. So, guys, I will answer those via email as soon as I can over the next couple of days. So, so thanks for sending those through, and thanks everyone for attending. Yeah, we'll keep you posted. I'm sure there'll be more content on the way from us, over the next couple of months. So keep your eyes peeled, and we'll be in touch to follow up on this over the next few days. Thanks very much.